Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. How are you today? Today I'm back with 4 stories. First story is about OP's best friend, who was furious how OP named her son because it reminds her of her ex-friend's deceased child. Enjoy the stories, guys, and don't forget to like and subscribe. And of course, don't forget to leave a comment. I've been best friends with Chelsea since we met through mutual friends 5 years ago. We instantly clicked and soon enough became sister-like. She was there when I met my husband, and she was my maid of honor at our wedding 3 years ago. Now, Chelsea knows how much I've been wanting a child. I grew up with 6 siblings, and I loved every second of it. My husband and I want 3 children. When I told Chelsea I was pregnant, she was completely ecstatic. She instantly began calling herself Auntie and went baby clothes shopping insane when I told her it was a boy. I think Chelsea is going to be the perfect aunt for my son. Originally, we wanted to name him Benjamin, but it is just a name we both liked, but we weren't sure yet. I am 7 months pregnant now, and unfortunately, my husband lost his grandfather, Adam, 2 weeks ago. He was very close to him, as was I. He was the first family member we told about our son, and was our biggest supporter when we moved into our own home. We truly loved Adam. This Monday morning, my husband texted me asking if we could talk. We had lunch, and he explained that he wants to honor his grandfather and name his son Adam. He has his father's blessing to do so. It was his father, and his grandmother. And if we wanted to, the family thought it was a wonderful idea. I instantly agreed. There was no doubt in my mind. Our son will be named Adam Benjamin. My husband was overjoyed and actually cried in the restaurant. He was so happy. He told me that this means the world to him that I agreed. Last night, Chelsea came over to make cupcakes, and I told her the good news. Her face instantly dropped. She started crying and threw the bowl into the sink and left. No communication at all. I was completely at a loss for words and tried calling her several times. I had no idea what I did. At first, I thought she had just grown attached to the name Benjamin, and I felt so bad. But that was never a solidified name to begin with, just a nickname. This morning, she called me at work to say that she couldn't believe I would do that to her and that I was a B. I asked her what I did wrong, and she told me, "You're so ducking jealous, aren't you?" Adam was Carly's son. Carly is someone who used to be Chelsea's best friend. They had a huge fight right before we met. They tried reconciling, and we all tried being friends, but it just didn't end up working out. Carly and I completely clashed in personalities, and she just hated me. I admit, there was some jealousy when Chelsea would talk about all the good times she had with Carly without me. But I understood that this wasn't a relationship. And even if it was, you can't have possession over people. Carly had a son, Adam, apparently, when she was 21. Unfortunately, Adam died of SIDS a month later. I knew about this, but I didn't know his name. I texted Chelsea to apologize, and that I never meant to put salt in her wound, but she acted like I was responsible for her original loss. I felt so bad. She texted me back that I was only doing this because I hated Carly, and that she never wanted to talk to me again unless I changed my mind. I am seriously at a loss here. What do I do? I don't want to upset anyone, but I feel like this is our son. We are naming him out of love, not out of spite. OP should stop indulging this twittish behavior. OP has nothing to apologize for. This is OP's son, and she has every right to name him what she wants. OP is not asking her if it's okay, she is telling her that this is how it is. It's not OP's job to tend to others' mental problems, where they think they can decide what is right or wrong in OP's life. A real friend, if she was one, would shut her mouth. OP needs to rethink this selfish, self-centered person as a friend. My husband's best friend passed away 8 months ago from a car accident. He left behind his wife and 2-year-old son. He and my husband were like brothers. They were very close, and this loss impacted my husband. He'd keep saying that he lost his brother and a true friend. To be frank, he was dealing with so much grief and sorrow, and no longer had interest in doing certain things. He, however, kept visiting his friend's widow regularly to check in on her and her son. I know her, and she's a decent person, and I cannot imagine what she's going through. I have so much empathy for her and her son. My husband started going over to her place a lot. He'd bring food and stuff and check on her and her son often. He, at first, was very open and honest with me about wanting to help his friend's widow with whatever he can. And I understand why he felt this way. But I noticed that he's purposely skipping work and family events to go visit her. He still called to tell me that he was at her place. This started affecting our lives majorly. I sat him down and talked about what's going on. He kept saying he felt he wasn't doing enough. I told him to take it easy, and he's done his best to support his friend's widow in this difficult time. I asked him to regain focus on work and other important things in his life. I thought that would get him to see what I meant, but he stopped telling me where he goes. He started lying about where he was, lying about saying he was at his brother's house, and his brother would then say, no, he wasn't. So I knew he was lying and was probably at her place. I had a strong feeling that something was wrong. He let me use his phone and had nothing to hide. To my surprise, her number was no longer in his phone. There were no calls or texts, which was weird because he'd usually call to check on her. I asked about that, and he said he no longer has her number. But I accidentally discovered another phone hidden in his car and saw that they've been exchanging texts and phone calls. The text felt intimate, though they weren't sexting, but they felt very intimate. Most of the phone calls were over 15 minutes long, and most of them had her crying and my husband saying nothing, just breathing. The sound of his breath was loud enough for me to hear. I felt so much confusion and discomfort. I knew that there was something going on between them. I had many questions I wanted to ask him. I couldn't wait till he got back to the car to confront him with what I found, but for some reason, I waited for days. I wasn't acting myself, and my husband noticed something was wrong but never asked me. He came to me by himself and said he knew I knew something was up. He sat in front of me and started crying, swearing that he has been respectful of his friend's widow's boundaries and always considered her like a sister to him. From what he said, I felt like something happened between them, but he only talked about the messages and calls they shared and explained that it was her who kept reaching out to him, and he didn't want to make her feel like she was alone when they both suffered the same loss. He said he also knew how I'd feel about the constant calling, so he got another phone for the purpose of comforting her during this time, without causing issues in our relationship. But he already did. I told him this was not him confronting her, and those texts felt uncomfortably similar to an emotional affair. He insists that I got it wrong, and he swore up and down that nothing happened between them, and that he'd never betray his brother by even looking at her other than being a sister to him. He didn't say he was worried for our relationship, just that he'd never betray his friend. I couldn't determine if he was telling me the truth, but what he was saying contradicted what was on his phone. He brought the phone and deleted everything in front of me. He said he will no longer have contact with her, and asked me to forget her. So what? I'm supposed to forget that this even happened just because he said he will not be talking to her again? He kept asking, "What else do you want me to do?" in a loud tone, and we eventually had an argument, and he left at 10 p.m. I've been an absolute mess since then, and he hasn't stopped texting me to apologize for his outburst and his previous behavior. He kept saying he loves me and that he'd never think of hurting me, then talked about his deceased friend. I can't help but feel I lost trust in him after what he did, no matter what his intentions were. OP needs to tell him to get therapy for the loss of his friend. He lost someone close to him, but from his actions, looks like he might also lose OP and his marriage. It's okay to support a friend, but not to the detriment of their marriage and his life. It's possible something happened between them, especially if they're both suffering and bonding over the same loss. If OP knows this woman, she should sit down with her and OP's husband, sort this out, and come to an understanding. OP should not let this rest, because it won't just go away. He won't forget about her, and neither should OP. Sorry guys, there's no update for this story. My mother was in the process of divorcing my father when she died. She was battling an aggressive cancer for a year and a half. 6 months into the ordeal, my father had a blow-up during his birthday, telling her he could not believe she couldn't put on a happy face for just one day. He quickly moved out of the house and rented a place where he took his business trips. My mother was in denial until somebody close to her told her that they saw my father firsthand out and about kissing another woman. She filed for divorce 1 month before her death, and my father went public with his new girlfriend, 27 female. After she died, my father came to the house with a family friend and made a huge scene, crying and saying they had a good marriage and family. As the husband of the deceased, most people expected him to plan the funeral, but conversations with him usually turned to preparing the house for sale and dealing with the estate that he expects to get as the husband. He and his girlfriend moved into the house, and finally, he said that me and my mother were the event planners in the family, so it would be better in my hands, and he gives me full right to do as I think best. He also said he wanted no events at their place because his girlfriend is a germaphobe about where she lives. I ended up doing all the work with my grandmother, aunt, and my mother's best friend. When I sent him the formal notification about when and where we would be holding the memorial, he asked why there wasn't one addressed to his girlfriend, and then showed me screenshots of chats where both he and his girlfriend were criticized. All the people who have put love into my mother's funeral think it's inappropriate for the man my mother loved for her whole life to be sitting next to a new girlfriend. In addition, my father and his girlfriend are nicknamed Couple Club Molly by everyone in our circle under 40 because of how much PDA they show whenever they are out together. Her always sitting on his lap, making out, keeping their hands in inappropriate places. When I tried to gauge if my father would consider tapering off the touching and rubbing up against each other, sharing a seat, they've been known to do, he denies remembering one time they've even kissed in public, and says that he can't help but think I want to dictate how he grieves, and that you can't expect someone who's been cruelly touch-starved for like 2 years to accept that state of affairs. He says, invite both of us, or I assume you're not inviting me. My father never used to be like this. He used to be very affectionate and gregarious, but now everything that's so charming about him is worse than glib. My main concern is my grandmother, who has been suffering heart palpitations since we lost my mother, and the stress of dealing with drama or reminders of my father cheating is too much for her. Should I leave the ball in my father's court and let him decide what he wants to do? Or should I bite the bullet and formally invite his girlfriend? I have spent nearly all of my own money on this funeral, and my father contributed a total of $100. It very much sounds like he wants to play the part of the grieving husband while also showing off a young girlfriend. He's being very immature and selfish. OP should not invite her. Not sure why she'd even want to be there, considering the circumstances. And OP should be prepared to deal with things if he decides to show up with her. OP should have some sort of contingency plan for that. My husband and I have been together for 4 years. This is his second marriage. He was divorced when I met him and moved to my hometown for work. Honesty is an important factor in our marriage. We tell each other everything and never hide anything from each other. We have a 2-month-old son together, and the struggle began right after I got pregnant. My husband started behaving strange. He always said that he was happy and excited to be a dad, but his behavior showed the opposite. Throughout my pregnancy, he avoided to talk about our son, avoiding doing things like shopping for our son's necessities and discussing names and helping out with the nursery. However, he helped with other things, and I was responsible for everything that had to do with our son. I really thought the behavior was temporary, and everyone said it could be that he was finding it difficult to adapt as a new dad and will go back to normal once our son is born. But it got worse. He refused to hold him, refused to be with him alone, and only approaches him when he's asleep, and that's to look at him for a few minutes. I had no help from him. He didn't spend time with him nor touch anything that belongs to him. My mind started coming up with unreasonable thoughts, like maybe he regretted having a baby, although this was planned. Or maybe, I don't know, so many thoughts, and it made me feel this just isn't normal behavior. He'd literally go out of his way to avoid being with our son. He hasn't held him since he was born. There's no bonding going on whatsoever. I've talked to him many times about it, and all he said is that he is being too worried, overprotective of him. I suggested therapy, but he refused, saying he just needed time to get rid of the stress. So there was an accident where I had to go to the pharmacy and asked my husband to watch our son, not feed him, not change him, just watch him till I get back in 30 minutes. I got home and discovered that my husband was gone. I was livid. I called him and he lied, saying he had work. I got into a huge argument with him for leaving our son alone in the house, only because he clearly tried to avoid being a responsible dad for just 30 minutes. He explained this wasn't the case, but I didn't believe him. His sister came over and sat me down to tell me that my husband wasn't being neglectful on purpose, but he's struggling with the loss of his 6-month-old daughter who died in an accident caused by him. She swore it all was an accident, but my husband kept blaming himself for it. I was dumbfounded. I did not know he had a daughter with his ex-wife. I never saw any signs indicating he had a daughter. I know that he's divorced, but never told me about his deceased 6-month-old daughter. And it's probably the reason he's divorced, because he claimed it was because of infidelity. It was too much for me to handle. I felt like he'd been lying to me about many things and caused me so much stress and hardship, on top of what I have already been dealing with. I wanted some space, so I took our son and went to stay with my mom. Her reaction was major. She criticized my husband at every turn, called him a liar and a manipulator, and told me to leave him. He's got major issues besides he's not safe nor mentally stable to be around our son, since he already caused his daughter's death. She told me to focus on my son and do everything I can to protect him, despite the fact it's his own dad she was talking about. I haven't heard from him since I left the house, but his sister is in contact with me. And so far, we've talked few times about my husband's deceased daughter. I'm not gonna lie, I truly felt uneasy. The fact that the accident was caused by my husband's recklessness is so concerning. I told his sister how I really feel about him now, and that I can't let anything happen to my son, especially after what my husband did. It's too hard for me to say that I don't trust my husband. I asked her and his family for some time, but they kept saying I can't keep his son away from him, and he has every right to see him. I feel like there's a ton of pressure being placed on me on top of what I'm already dealing with right now, and his family keeps criticizing me for my stance. I could be acting cruel towards my husband's trauma. He's clearly struggling, and I have no doubt that he loves our son and would never hurt him, but his behavior is causing me to be concerned. He physically removed himself from being near his son. OP is not keeping him away. He's done that already. This whole thing is terrifying, and I think OP should consult an attorney ASAP. Clearly, OP's husband has issues he needs professional help to resolve.